Good morning and welcome to the first Unitarian Universalist Society of Albany. My name is Reverend Sam Trumbore, and today we are doing a joint service with the UU Congregation of the Catskills. Their minister, the Reverend Dr. Leonisa Ardizzone, will be joining me to lead the service. I want to say a special welcome to her and invite her to say hello too.
Yes, thank you. We are so grateful to join you this morning. This technology, I guess the upside is us being able to collaborate without having to get in our cars. So I think I can speak on behalf of my congregation to say thank you for including us, and we're looking forward to a collaborative service.
Okay, thank you. Before we begin, please check to make sure your microphone is muted. The same for your camera if your image is potentially distracting, and please also be mindful of your speech while on Zoom, as microphones do have a way of getting unmuted accidentally. And this will minimize any disruption in our service. You'll also notice that we are experimenting today with live transcript on the bottom of your screen. For those of you who are hard of hearing, this will be a great boon. But those of you who do not like seeing words at the bottom of your screen, you'll need to turn that off. And you can turn that off on your toolbar by looking for your live transcript, something with CC, and it might be in your More section if it's not on your toolbar now. This is now the time of transition from ordinary time to sacred time. Time to check in with your body, to collect your attention, to be present in this moment. Let this moment be separated from yesterday and tomorrow. Let this virtual space become a sanctuary for the next hour. Allow your screen to transform into your virtual sanctuary, to experience images, sounds and music, songs, poetry and prose that will lift your heart, broaden your mind, and move you to do justice in the world in the service of building beloved community. May this virtual service be holy time for each of us that joins us together in the celebration of life. And our prelude is We Shall Be Known by Carisha Langaker and Sarah Nutting, musicians Ella and Catherine Catabani.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time to lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time to lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
Let us light our chalice together in the words that we use here in Albany. Welcoming all free seekers of truth and meaning, we gather to excite the human spirit, to inspire its growth and development, to respond morally and ethically to a troubled world, and to sustain a vital and nurturing religious community. And let us sing with Fred Small's piece, Peace Is. And our musicians are the Becker Family Band, Ross, Lindsay, and Rob.
Peace is the bread we break. Love is the river rolling. Life is a chance we take when we make this earth our home. Gonna make this earth our home. Feel the cool breeze blowing through the smoke and the heat. Hear the gentle voices and the marching feet. Singing, call back the fire, draw the missiles down, and we'll call this earth our home. Peace is the bread we break. Love is the river rolling. Life is the chance we take when we make this earth our home. Gonna make this earth our home. We have known the atom, the power and the pain. We've seen people fall beneath the killing rain. If the mind still reasons and the soul remains, it shall never be again. Peace is the bread we break. Love is the river rolling. Life is the chance we take when we make this earth our home. Gonna make this earth our home. Peace grows from a tiny seed as the acorn grows into the tallest tree. Many years ago I heard a soldier say, when people want peace, better get out of the way. Peace is the bread we break. Love is the river rolling. Life is a chance we take when we make this earth our home. Gonna make this earth our home.
Our wisdom tale is I Am Enough by Grace Byers. And we have lots of readers who are going to share it with us.
I Am Enough by Grace Byers.
Like the sun, I'm here to shine. Like the voice, I'm here to sing. Like the bird, I'm here to fly and soar high over everything.
Like the trees, I'm here to grow. Like the mountains, here to stand.
Like time, I'm here to be and be everything I can. Like the champ, I'm here to fight. Like the heart, I'm here to love. Like a ladder, you to climb, and like the air, to rise above. Like the wind, I'm here to push. Like a rope, I'm here to pull. Like the rain, I'm here to pour and drip and fall until I'm full. Like the moon, I'm here to dream. Like the student, here to learn. Like the water, here to swell. Like the fire, here to burn.
Like the winner, I'm here to win. And if I don't, get up again.
I know that I may sometimes cry, but even then, I'm here to try. I'm not meant to be like you. You're not meant to be like me. Sometimes we will get along, and sometimes we will disagree. I know that we don't look the same, or skin or eyes or hair or flame. But that does not dictate our worth. We both have places here on earth. And in the end, we are right here to live a life of love, not fear. To help each other when it's tough, to say together, I am enough.
Well, welcome to Albany UU, to our Facebook viewers. And thank you, Leah, for that wonderful story. That was beautifully done. And we have some opening words that I'd like to share with you. From 1953 until 1981, a silver-haired woman calling herself only Peace Pilgrim walked more than 25,000 miles on a personal pilgrimage for peace. Wearing, I think she wore a blue tunic and was carrying just a few worldly possessions in her pockets, she shared her simple but profound message in thousands of communities throughout the US. When enough of us find inner peace, our institutions will become peaceful and there will be no occasion for war. With me, I carry always my peace message. This is the way of peace. Overcome evil with good, falsehood with truth, and hatred with love. There's nothing new about this message except the practice of it. And the practice of it is required not only in the international situation, but also in the personal situation. I believe that the situation in the world is a reflection of our own immaturity. If we were mature, harmonious people, war would not be a problem, whatever. It would be impossible. All of us can work for peace. We can work right where we are, right within ourselves, because the more peace we have within our own lives, the more we can reflect into the outer situation. In fact, I believe that the wish to survive will push us into some kind of uneasy world peace, which will then need to be supported by a greater inner awakening if it is to endure. I believe we entered the new age when we discovered nuclear energy, and that this new age calls for a new renaissance to lift us to a higher level of understanding so that we will be able to cope with the problems of this new age. Here end the reading of Peace Pilgrim's words, beautiful as they are. In the spirit of cultivating inner peace that we share with the world, let us worship together.
We have two readings for you this morning. The first comes from Vietnamese Buddhist monk that most of you know, Thich Nhat Hanh, from his book, Being Peace. He writes, during the war in Vietnam, We young Buddhists organized ourselves to help victims of the war rebuild villages that had been destroyed by the bombs. Many of us died during service, not only because of the bombs in the bullets, but because of the people who suspected us of being on the other side. We were able to understand the suffering of both sides, the communists and the anti-communist. We tried to be open to both, to understand this side and to understand that side, to be one with them. That is why we did not take a side, even though the whole world took sides. We tried to tell people our perception of the situation, that we wanted to stop the fighting. But the bombs were so loud. Sometimes we had to burn ourselves alive to get the message across. But even then, the world couldn't hear us. They thought it was a political action. They didn't know that it was a purely human action to be heard, to be understood. We didn't want a victory, we wanted reconciliation. Working to help people in a circumstance like that is very dangerous, and many of my friends were killed. The communists killed us because they suspected that we were working with the Americans, and the anti-communists killed us because they thought that we were with the communists. But we didn't give up, and we didn't take sides. The situation of the world is still like this. People identify completely with one side, one ideology. To understand the suffering and the fear of a citizen of another country, we have to become one with him or her. To do so is dangerous. We will be suspected by both sides. But if we don't do it, if we align ourselves with one side or the other, we will lose our chance to work for peace. Reconciliation is to understand both sides, to go to one side and describe the suffering being endured by the other side, and then to go to the other side and describe the suffering being endured by the first side. Doing only that will be a great help for peace. Our second reading comes from peace researcher and peace activist Elise Boulding, the introduction to her book, Cultures of Peace, The Hidden Side of History. Put in the simplest possible terms, a peace culture is a culture that promotes peaceable diversity. Such a culture includes lifeways, patterns of beliefs, values, behavior, and accompanying institutional arrangements that promote mutual caring and well-being, as well as an equality that includes appreciation of difference, stewardship, and equitable sharing of the Earth's resources among its members and with all living beings. It offers mutual security for humankind in all its diversity through a profound sense of species identity, as well as kinship with the living Earth. There is no need for violence. In other words, peaceableness is an action concept involving a constant shaping and reshaping of understandings, situations, and behaviors in a constantly changing life world to sustain well-being for all.
And our meditation this morning comes from Lao Tzu. If there is to be peace, if there is to be peace in the world,
there must be peace in the nations.
If there is to be peace in the nations,
there must be peace in the cities.
If there is to be peace in the cities,
there must be peace between neighbors.
If there is to be peace between neighbors,
there must be peace in the home.
If there is to be peace in the home,
there must be peace in the heart.
Let us take these words on our own thoughts, reflections, and prayers into a time of silence, although the birds are a little loud, but you can enjoy the presence of them. Love those birds. All right. Well, this is such a delight to have the two of us together to talk about peace. And of course, I grew up in the 60s and protested for peace against Vietnam War, and I've always thought a lot about peace, but I've never studied it. And you are a peace educator. And so I'm just really looking forward to our interaction, our chance to talk a little bit about how do we, in this world of violence, I look around and just so much, and we had some good readings about how to approach it, but how do we educate people to move away from what seems to be our natural inclination towards violence, towards being more oriented towards peace, so that we can maybe be like somebody like Peace Pilgrim?
It's a great question, isn't it, Sam?
Oh my gosh, very challenging stuff.
Right? Yes. And studying it was not without moments of, why do we still have to keep talking about this? Why aren't things changing? You know, when you're deep in it and you spend, for me, I spend most of my time with folks who are peace educators or peace researchers. And it's like you think about it all the time and you say, well, how do we get there? And that's my, question for years, just like yours. And I guess what I could do is start with a little bit of, an early thought, which I think lends itself to the readings we've done and Unitarian Universalism. But we, one of the things we do in peace education and in peace studies is to look at the levels of peace, right? So we can look at it on a personal, interpersonal, and systemic, right? And I'm deliberately moving my hands because it's like these concentric circles of understanding with almost like a ripple effect as that understanding becomes, right? So if we start on the personal level, which is very much what Peace Pilgrim is writing about, and actually even Elise Boulding writes a lot about that too, that we have to work on transforming ourselves, right? Acknowledging our own patterns, our own trauma, or the things that keep us from maybe fully being models of peace, right? Which is that it's work, right? We know that's work. And I know we'll probably talk about that a little bit more later, right? But we have to learn to communicate. We have to learn to embody the values that lead to a culture of peace. It's one thing to just say, I want peace, and then you go about your business, right? If you don't cultivate equanimity or the ability to see other people's points of view, right? So, and also to work on our own non-reactivity. So something on a personal level, because then that makes it possible for us on the interpersonal level to interact with other people, right? So, and the environment, I would say too, right? Like if we're cultivating our inner peace, we interact with people differently. We can have conversations. We can do like Thich Nhat Hanh is talking about, speak to both sides and try to point out suffering. Interpersonal is not about getting your way. It's about reconciling to try and figure out how we can work together and find a more peaceable, mindful way, or even like a third way, to quote the Buddha in there, right? How we communicate, the choices we make, anything as far as like what kind of lettuce you buy to how you speak to someone, right? Is all, I think, absorbed into that interpersonal. And from there, we can go to the systemic piece, right? We begin to see ourselves not as just lone wolf, lone individuals, but as part of something far greater, a larger global picture, and realizing that the choices here affect people around the world, halfway around the world, or even 10 minutes away. And it becomes a choice to say, oh, if I see this systemic issues, which in my world, we call it structural violence, right? The world and institutions and issues, we would call them inherently violent. And they are violent in the sense that they were embedded in all the structures of our institution. Then when we see the system, then we can make the choice to say, I want to work towards dismantling this system. And I know it's long haul work. I know it's not a Band-Aid. I know I'm going to be at this for a while. And all three of these rely on education. So that's the peace education piece. So it doesn't matter if it's like books you read on your own and conversations you have, or it could be in school, it could be after school programs, it could be small group ministries, how we live in our congregations, wherever there is learning, there's a chance for peace learning.
Well, this is good. I'm really appreciating your framing it in this way, because I'm so aware of how, yes, I can be working on my own stuff, but then if there's an institutional structure that's above me, that's large, that affects me, then that might interfere with my ability to create peace in my life. Or I could be maybe being peaceful, but if I don't have peace in my family, like our readings this morning, each of these levels are all dependent on each other.
Yeah.
The problem that I get into with peace is I've decided I'm going to be a peaceful guy. I work pretty hard at it. As you know, a lot of people know I meditate, so I'm very good at, learning how to calm myself and be able to, get along with things and not be too reactive. But there's always that situation that comes along where I get activated by something. And it's not that I am not trying. It's not even that my commitment level, I might make a decision to it, but then my amygdala kicks in and bang, the hormones get pumping through my bloodstream and I get reactive. My frontal cortex, whoosh, just shuts right down. And then you add to that, somebody wants to change things. I don't know if you noticed this. I noticed this. Somebody wants to change things, like, I don't know about that. I kind of like the way things are. I even feel that way. I was making breakfast this morning and I was thinking about changing something. And I was thinking, no, I can't change that. It has to be this way. And it's like, oh my God, we get so attached to things. And so I was wondering about how we can work through some of this stuff. We have in our congregation, we recognize that if we want to have diverse congregation and inclusive congregation, we need ways to do conflict resolution, because especially around issues that activate deep patterns that might be embedded in us in the culture, we often need some outside assistance to help us. When we're in that prefrontal cortex shutdown, we might not even know it's happening, to get out of that. So what kind of methods, how do we do that? I bet peace educators think about this all the time.
Yeah, and part of our education is being I forgot how many years, or at least 1 or 2 years of conflict resolution training, right? So it's peace education really looks at, we're really big picture people, right? Like this blanket, all these things fall under peace, right? And it's funny because you were mentioning like the protests, right? That we it's always seen as utopian, but then you're like, well, actually, we're working for peace if we learn how to manage conflict and change, right? That's a real on the ground thing we can do. So so being able to recognize when something, like you even said, sometimes we don't even know we're reacting, right? Because it's buttons that have been put down, imprinted on us since we were teeny tiny. And now all this research shows that it goes back generations, right? Add generational trauma to the practice of trying to work out conflict. And, it's no wonder it's really hard to. Well, there's two things I could say, and then I want to maybe throw it back to you too, is that, didn't you and I talk about how that the kanji for crisis is transformation and, right?
Opportunity.
And
Yeah.
right. And I think I think that we don't see models enough, right? So that's another thing in peace education, right? We go to schools that are very much competitive, that if there's a problem, the kid gets taken out of the school, right? Or the class, or they're punished. We don't really have models for mediation, for reconciliation. So it's almost a relearning, right? So when I'm feeling something, we've sort of been trained to either just stuff it, right? Stuff it down until it's going to explode at a later date at the wrong person, possibly, or to vent it in some way that doesn't move the conversation forward. And so I think part of and I think it's a kind of a spiritual practice to notice when something is bothering you and then figure out, how do I talk about this? And then who do I talk to? And how do I do it in a way that's not just about, having my stuff heard, but saying, how do we move this conversation forward? Right? So it's about, again, that opportunity transformation piece, not the I'm right, you're wrong, right?
One of the things that we were talking about earlier that I thought was really interesting was recognizing that we have these blinders on, in a sense, when we're experiencing things, and we often aren't aware of the wider perception that we might be able to have. You were mentioning like a fly. Could you talk about that example? I thought the example was fascinating.
Yeah, so for all the years I've been teaching, 20 some years teaching peace education, and not even when I teach peace education, even when I teach science or anything, I encourage students, I encourage everybody to imagine the world as if you had a fly's eye, right? So flies have compound lenses. So they're getting, hundreds of pieces of information at the same time, right? Which we talked about, that must be hard to process. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, if you look at any issue or problem through as many perspectives as you can, so through a race lens, an ethnicity lens, a religious lens, a oppression, as many of these things, then it no longer looks like a simple problem, or it's like someone acting out. You look at it and you see, oh, this is an intersectional, right? If I look at it, like if I took, and backed myself up and then tried to see as many perspectives of an issue. And that is something we do in peace education, where it's a multiple perspective taking activity, where we look at assumptions. We question, right? Because when you first look at a problem, you're looking at it from your own lens, right? And you see it. And so here I am, this white woman, cis het white woman. Could only see the world that way. If I didn't ask myself to say, now look at that problem or that issue or the world from multiple perspectives. Because when you do that, it gets you into the place of questioning your own assumptions, which we very, very rarely do. And then, this is my favorite part of peace education, is my mentor, Betty Reardon, calls it deracination. And it's getting to the roots, right? So it's all about root causes, right? So if we see things on the surface, it's when we start digging, whether it's roots, or you can use the peeling back the onion idea, but whatever that is we get to root causes. And when we look at something like, say, people love to throw the example of how much violence there is in inner cities or in poor neighborhoods, right? And you could just make it about people being bad, right? Behaving badly. If you take that deracination, the root cause look, you realize it's a structurally violent system that puts people in inhumane housing with underfunded schools, no healthy eating alternative, right? There's hardly ever a decent grocery store. There's more liquor stores in neighborhoods that have poverty. That's where they put power plants or waste treatment facilities. So all this systemic stuff creates a system that traps people. And there are, numerous researchers show that when you can't figure out how to make the change towards the people who are oppressing you, you act out laterally. And so you see violence in communities that is a direct result of basically being oppressed in many different ways. And we don't think about that. We tend to look at it saying, it's about this, it's about this. And you're saying, you got to pull back and see there's a lot more going on, and it's all connected.
Well, and doing that pulling back, that's the part that I think is hard, because we assume that people have that self-reflective mindset, but not everybody does. Okay. And so I think that's one of the questions that I often ask myself is, how do we move people in that direction? Now, I do Buddhist meditation practice, and that's the way that's been very helpful for me to cultivate that practice. And Buddhism has the concept of cause and effect, so that things, as you talked about, you can see there's behaviors, and if you can get to the root causes, you can see, oh, this is the cause, there's a linkage there. And I think sometimes thinking cause and effect, and then also being aware of your own inner processes, gives you a little larger framework to do this. I mean, again, with Peace Pilgrim and kind of know yourself, there's definitely developing spiritual practices, doing meditation. Therapy is very helpful for people sometimes to get out of their own little loops and get to a larger perspective, because they're working with one other person who is holding a second view that kind of opens them up.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's other tools. I think you came to Unitarian Universalism after doing peace education. And when you came in, I was kind of curious about how, when you enter Unitarian Universalism with all of this peace awareness, the things that you saw that you said, wow, these UUs already have some of what we're looking for here for peace educators.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there was a reason this felt like my religious home, because I look at our 7 principles and say, okay, we've got almost all of this covered. It's just a matter of how. Actually, I'm going to fix that and say I think we have it all covered in those 7 principles. I think the 8th principle conversation is an interesting one, but I think we could also see that throughout the 7. And I do want to point out, Sam, you and I are both leading the Racial Healing Handbook workshops at our congregations. And that's a wonderful self-awareness tool, because it's a whole different way of looking at how we process race and our role in the systemic, like from a personal to a systemic issue. So I just remembered that we were both doing that.
Yeah, it's been good.
So one of my the thing that got me hooked on peace education and actually became the conceptual framework for my doctoral research 20 years ago are these 3 core values. So Betty Reardon, that I mentioned already, and my people hear me talk about Betty a lot. She's the founder of peace education in the United States. She's now 92 and still publishing and teaching. And she, in the I want to say early 80s, came up with these 3 core values: humane relationship, global citizenship, and planetary stewardship. And when you think about those 3, it covers everything. It kind of covers everything we've talked about so far, right? It's like our own self, because then we learn to be in humane relationship with other people. We see ourselves as global citizens. So it's not just about I'm a New Yorker or I'm an American or I live here. It's more like, wait, we all share the planet, right? We're all star stuff. We're all breathing the same air. And then the planetary stewardship piece, that's kind of the main reason we get to even be alive here, is if we take care of the planet. So I think what I'm working on right now is a matrix of laying the 3 core values over the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism, because I think that our principles give us opportunity to be aware of each one of those. I mean, the first principle alone, right? The inherent worth and dignity covers humane relationship, how we speak to one another; global citizenship, how we see ourselves as part of a far bigger construct than a congregation or a neighborhood; and planetary stewardship. If it's the dignity of all beings, then if something environmentally happens and floods a community 3,000, 7,000, whoever knows how many thousand miles away, we have to care about that too, because the dignity of those folks is being compromised, right?
Well, I was thinking about this in the context of the last administration, who did not have this global perspective at all. And that there were many citizens in our country who, when they look across our borders, don't see their fellow world citizens, in fact, they want to keep them on the other side of the border. And the work of, and I think that trying to create peace in the world when you don't want to be a neighbor to the neighbor across the border is a bit of a challenge. And so one of the things I'm wondering if there's insights that you experienced to, this is the big problem that we're struggling with right now in the wake of the election, is the polarization and being able to talk across the red-blue boundaries. And for me, when I struggle with that, I struggle with peacemaking as part of that problem, because I don't want to see January 6th become a repeated pattern in the rest of the country. So there's something we have to do about that. And I wonder if there's something in peace education that, because we're working with people who are kind of resistant on the other side. I'm just wondering if you have any insights on that.
It is one of the things I think about all the time too, because it's really easy to have these conversations with people who think like you, and everyone says, yes,
exactly.
Right. And, preaching to the choir, as it were. Right. And what you're bringing up, though, it reminds what you were talking about the amygdala again. There's all this research that shows that we're tribal beings, right? And we're basically trying to overcome thousands of years of evolution that tells us
millions of years.
Millions, right, exactly. Going all the way, right? Our forebears in the pre-mammalian world, right? Like, how do we even? So we're up against a lot, but I think awareness is part of it. And I say this without irony, because I've been an educator for so long that I really think our education system has failed us in many ways, because we don't promote critical thinking or problem posing or project, thinking or collaboration. So we then go out into the world thinking that I have to do my thing, and we measure what we value based on our own opinions, not the opinions of other people, right? So that just reinforces that piece. And
that multi-perspective of the fly, yeah. Just getting people to think that way would be revolutionary, wouldn't it?
I think it would be a game changer. And I was listening to a filmmaker I went to this collective trauma workshop online, and she was talking about how she did have conversations who were, people who were actually hateful of her because they were white supremacists. She was this brown-skinned woman. And she said, I'm not going to try to change your mind. I would just like to understand your thinking, right? Like, can you just tell me where you're coming from? And she just listened. Now, can you imagine how much spiritual fortitude it took for her to just listen?
Yeah.
And then she said, okay, can I say anything? Like, I don't even know if she asked or he said, tell me what your take on that is. And before you knew it, they were actually having a dialogue from people from two completely different views. And she turned it into a film, so maybe we can all do a screening or something sometime.
Or something, yeah, that sounds interesting.
I think that is the constant question. I think it's a ongoing spiritual practice. I think it's something we can learn in our congregations, right? We have people, that's another thing about Unitarian Universalism. We don't all have a same journey to have gotten here, nor do we have the same and identical creedal understanding of why we're here. So even within our congregations, we have the opportunity of learning how to be, if not, I don't like the word tolerant because I think that just is like too small, but whether it's accepting or enter into dialogue with people who see the world differently as us and see where that takes us. And then, I think it's practice, right? Isn't that what Thich Nhat Hanh always just says, right? And His Holiness, right? It's all about, you have to practice these things. It's one thing to do it, but it's another to practice, because otherwise you know.
Yeah. And I'm watching the clock because we could have this conversation for another hour, but exactly. We have to let other people talk too. Let's see. But what I recognize is, if you don't mind, if I can wrap up a little bit here, the thing that's so important, I think, is that to recognize that we can't do this by ourselves. If I want to make peace all by myself, I could be maybe like Peace Pilgrim. I could go out and walk around the country, and I could maybe do that, maybe make a little bit of a dent. But if I want to be effective, I have to be part of a community. I have to be a part of a movement. I have to be part of something bigger of which I can put my energy into. And I love the fact that you find peace, the affirmation of peace education right in Unitarian Universalism. I think that's a wonderful validation. And it's also our roots in our Universalist view, where, we're not sending anybody to hell, or our focus on diversity and welcome and inclusion. We are trying to figure out how to build this world community, which is our sixth principle. I have to lift that up. Sixth principle, world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. That we need a commitment that is to a we, not a commitment to a the, us, them. And moving that direction from the we from the us, them, which is kind of the innate, born into us way of being, and to the commitment to we, is the transformation that I think is absolutely critical. And the other thing we talked about earlier, but I just want to bring it up briefly, is that that we're focused on this world. We're not trying to punch our ticket to get out of this world. We're focused on here and now. We want to save this world, and we need commitment to peace to get there. I loved in the opening song that the lyric, I was just writing it down. It was just so beautiful. Life is the chance we take when we make this world our home. Going to make this world our home. I think that's what peace education, it sounds like what you're saying. Peace education is making this world our home.
It is. And an eye for, we talk a lot about the future, not in the afterlife, but in the sense of we have to envision the world we want to see, and then we have to do the work that gets us to that place.
So be it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam. That was great.
And we'll turn it over to for the offering.
Good morning. My name is Eric Van Housen, and I'll be your service associate today. An important way we celebrate life each Sunday is by offering an opportunity to practice generosity. Members and friends support our congregation with an annual pledge paid throughout the year. Another way is to support the good work of this congregation is by making a generous contribution via one of the options shown on this slide. You can click on the tiny URL link in the chat window to contribute, or you can send a text to the number shown on the screen. The examples on the slide show you how to label your text to indicate the amount and the purpose or intent of your gift. And now we must say goodbye to our Facebook friends. Consider joining us on Zoom next time by visiting albanyu.org. Our offertory music is Peace Like a River, an American spiritual, arranged by Donald Moore, musicians, Albany UU Virtual Choir.
I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. In my heart is playing a sweet melody. I've got peace like a river in my soul.
I've got joy, I've got joy, I've got joy,
Sweet joy,
I've got joy,
I've got joy in my soul.
in my heart is ringing a sweet melody.
I've got joy like a river in my soul. I've got love like a river. I've got love like a river. I've got love like a river in my soul. And in my heart is singing a sweet melody. I've got love like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river in my soul. Hallelujah.
We enjoy welcoming guests and visitors to our service. If you're a guest or visitor and you would like to tell us who you are or where you're from, you can click on the raise hand symbol. Depending on your Zoom version, you will find the raise hand option either in the participant window or in the reactions button on your Zoom toolbar. Our technician will invite you to unmute and introduce yourself. You may also, or instead, click on the visitor link you'll find now in the chat window.
All right. Of course, we welcome all the folks from UU Catskills, but at the moment I'm not seeing anybody with their hand raised.
Okay. Thank you and welcome all who have joined us today. If you'd like to learn more about our congregation or Unitarian Universalism, you can find in the participant window someone with welcome before their name. You can reach out to that person privately and in the chat window or during the service. We welcome the chance to greet one another. In our Zoom format, this is done through virtual breakout rooms. You can say hello, share your name. This will last about 2 minutes, and then we'll come back together.
Good morning. French writer Jean-Baptiste Carr once famously said, "Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose." The more things change, the more they remain the same. Boy, is that ever true. I've been a member of Albany UU for more than 30 years. Over that time, things have changed. The congregation has changed. New members come, old members leave. Some of the children that Carolyn and I taught in pre-K RE now have children of their own. Our ministers have changed. Although after 20 plus years, Reverend Trumbore now checks the box for remains the same. Our space has changed with the community hall addition, and our lives have changed as we know all too well from this past year. And yet things have remained the same. My first volunteer job when I began attending Albany UU was as a member of the old interior decorating committee. For those who remember the large black metal blood sculpture, I was tasked with repainting the wooden display base. Fast forward to this past week, and what was I doing? Painting part of the hallway in the basement near the elevator. More meaningfully, what also remains the same is the commitment of our members to create and maintain a loving, welcoming, and progressive community. Albany UU is a place where we can share commonalities, discuss our differences, and provide our young people with a nurturing environment in which to explore the world and themselves. It is this sense of community which brought me here many years ago. It is this sense of community which has kept me here all this time. And it is this sense of community which offers me a home and hope for the future. I want to ensure that Albany UU remains a vital part of our neighborhood, our city, and our world. I do this by offering my time, my talent, and a generous annual financial contribution. I urge you to do the same. Paintbrushes are optional. Thank you.
Good morning. This is the time set aside in our service for sharing significant personal milestones in our lives. There are 3 ways to share a joy or sorrow. The first option is to type your joy or sorrow in the chat window. Please put the words "read aloud" at the beginning of your message if you would like us to do that. Please also consider connecting privately in the chat with a pastoral care associate. You may identify the ones on duty today in the participant window. Look for PCA before their name. Today, Sandy Stone, that's me. Hi, Bob. And Dee Van Riper are the pastoral care associates. The second option is to click the raise hand symbol found either in the participant window or under the reactions button. Our technician will invite you to unmute yourself and speak your joy or sorrow. The third option is to submit a joy or sorrow using our website by noon on Friday prior to the service. We'll begin by reading those that were submitted this past week. Then we'll hear the spoken joys and sorrows, followed by the chat entries that are to be read aloud.
All right, thank you, Sandy. I did not receive any pre-submitted joys and sorrows. So I'm looking right now for folks who want to share with us. Yes, we'll start with Jan McCracken. Jan, go ahead and share.
Hi, everyone. I'm just feeling very happily overwhelmed by the love and support of this congregation, and I'm picking up on some things I just heard Bob Franklin say about this congregation and the community spirit that we hold together. My mom, I've been spending about 3 weeks getting a lot of love and support from you in the grief process of my mom's passing. And it's not just me, it's we. It is we. We've been in this together, and I just thank everybody for all your love.
Thanks, Jan. Anyone else? Raise your hand. Well, seeing no others, I think we can move on to the chat sorrows and joys.
Okay, the first read aloud I find is from Al DeSalvo. Susan Thompson's status has deteriorated since Tuesday. She is close to passing. Please keep her in your hearts as she goes through this transition. And I'm looking to see what else we might have. And from Carolyn Bradley, I just returned from a 13-day stay with my daughter who lives in, I'm not going to get it, Viques, Puerto Rico, an island off the coast. It was pure joy to be with her and her husband for that much time. And also from Jim Jacoin, we are so happy for our son and daughter-in-law who welcomed a new dog from South Carolina into their little family yesterday. Ren is everything they hoped for and is helping them heal from the loss of their beloved dog last November. And that is all I am finding right now. For the joys and sorrows that remain unspoken, let us hold all that we've heard and felt in our hearts.
The prayer of affirmation that I have is inspired to respond to the violence against Asian Americans. Let us honor Chinese wisdom with our prayer, again from Lao Tzu, called a balance prayer. Let us turn inward for these words. Let us empty of all doctrines. The Tao is wisdom, eternally inexhaustible, fathomless for the mere intellect. The Tao is the law, wherewith all things come into being. It blunts the edge of the intellect, untangles the knots of the mind, softens the glare of thinking, and settles the dust of thought. Transparent, yet invisible. The Tao exists like deep, translucently clear water. Its origin is unknown, for it existed before heaven and earth. So be it. And our closing song, Shalom Haverim, which you can join in with at home. You got the words, Shalom Haverim, was put together by the Albany UU and Catskills UU virtual choir. So it's a joint performance. Please enjoy.
As we extinguish the chalice, please join in the words shown on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
May you go into your week with a hopeful heart and a curious mind, knowing that each of us can be instruments of peace. May we all commit to working for peace on personal, interpersonal, and global levels so that we may be part of this important work of transformation. May it be so. Blessed be and amen.
Okay, our thanks today to readers, Alex, Ben Pigot, Flora Sleisinger, Natalie, Rowan Pigot, Simon, and Zora Miller. Musicians, the Albany UU Virtual Choir, Albany and Catskill UU Virtual Choir, Becker Family Band, Ella and Catherine Catabiani. Ushers today were Kristen Abbas, Dawn Dana, Chuck Manning, and Jean Poppy. Pastoral Care Associates, Sandy Stone and Dee Van Riper. Community Messenger with Bob Franklin. Welcomer today was Peter Brown. I'm, of course, Eric Bunhausen, the Service Associate. Office Support, Tammy Hathaway, Elizabeth Valdez, and Technical Support, Chris Jensen.